You're all set.
I'm WiK.
And I'm Mubix. Your first.
Gitdigger, creating useful word lists.
So how come we're not?
So I did all the research. All the research. And most of the work.
Uh-oh. Sounds real good.
Good.
You did all the work.
I didn't work on that.
So I'm Mubix. I'm talking about how this can work in the offensive world.
So I really suck at picturing people in their underwear. So feel free to get naked. I like to ask the women to come up front and who's going back.
That means you, Egypt.
So we weren't the first to do this. Tuna Security, they did this first. They went through and downloaded over 500,000 repositories, or 5,000 repositories, 400,000 words in their database.
So the only problem with copying that is that they use Google Code, and they did this a lot of it manually. We tried, WiK tried to do this automatically, which sucks when you're talking about a website with CAPTCHAs.
Yes.
So Google Code is not the way to go.
I am a very lazy individual.
So this is the only reason why I'm up here, because someone in IRC posted this link. WiK said, nice find. Passive V said, I wish I'd thought of it. I said, that's awesome. I wish someone had done this with GitHub. And then he's like, next time.
I can do it. Now remember, this is 2 a.m. in the morning.
It is.
So I'm thinking I'm going to hammer this shit out and then go to bed by 3. So here's the first problem. I am half asleep, and the only way I could think of at this point is to just go through the top rated repositories that they list on their website. It changes weekly. I can easily web scrape this. Problem solved.
No caption.
Yes. So what I did was I took some basic Python functions, pretty much wgetted the page, pulled out all the usernames and repositories, dumped them into an SQL-like database, and just started cloning them. Any questions so far? Understand? Pretty simple. So now I have all these repositories. I have no idea what to do with them, which is a lot. So I took some Python, OS walked all the Python, did some sed command line foo, lots of manual review, and then got the word list I wanted. The problem is I spent about 17 hours. Notice how my 30-minute
2 a.m. went to 2 a.m. the next day.
With a few naps. So I did a whole lot of manual kung fu sed scripts to get this all to work.
Notice I didn't have to do any work so far. It's awesome.
So the OS walk took forever trying to get the counts into SQL database. It was taking like 5 seconds per insert query. So there had to be a better way to loop through all these things. So I found BetterWalk, which claims that OS walk makes unnecessary API calls while it's looping through all the files and folders. It needs to figure out, is this a file, is this directory? Please tell me, because I'm too late to figure it out.
Also, if you see on here the link, it's not very, all the links that we're going to be talking about, you can take a quick picture with your phone and use the QR code to go to those links. We swear there's nothing malicious on them because he created them.
Yes. So there's a nice little graphic chart, shows you the speed up, and honestly I didn't really understand what they're talking about, but the chart impressed me, so I went, hey, let's use this instead. So now the good news, I've got word lists, they're interesting, people seem to like them. I only had what GitHub claimed was the top repositories. SQL transactions were horrible, way too much manual labor. And my hard drive was now full. We're talking maybe 2 terabytes at this time. Like my OS didn't even want to boot.
How did you build that so? What's your internet?
Actually, my internet for this is a 756 DSL line. That is what I'm working with. So I actually used Python and did threading and downloaded like 10 at a time. I started doing 30 at a time, but then I couldn't watch my Netflix. My kids were pissed. My wife was angry. She couldn't watch the stories. She's not in here. So now, let's get some serious. So my first problem is, how am I really going to store this data? So my options are Bitcasa, very cheap. It had built-in indexing so that you could easily search it. It indexed on the fly. At the time this was done, 6 months ago, it was a Windows-only client. I crashed it every single time I launched Robocopy. And it was very slow because it encrypted the traffic as you sent it over.
Security features suck.
Yes. So my other option was a NAS. Way expensive, and they just don't grow on trees. But it would have been perfect because it's central and local. I could fire up 50 VMs, started downloading using Tor, different IP addresses. Really had fun with this. Now remember, I've already got 3 terabytes of data that I'm trying to shift around here. So there was my solution.
That's what my computer looks like.
There is a couple, and these were all hooked up via external drives.
I've done my job.
Yes. Thank you, Vanna.
This is awesome.
So,
Can you
next,
go back to that? That's just,
that's just so awesome. Anyone want pictures of that?
That's literally all the data on each drive
10 terabytes.
in a database that's. Anyway.
So this at 2 in the morning, these are what I started with. I had them laying around. I had another drive laying around, and the other 2 were, once I filled up what I had, I was going to stop the project, but then thank you to some Nova hackers, they donated extra drive space because they really liked the idea of what I was doing. So now, I need a better way to download this stuff. Here comes API, I wish I saw at 2 in the morning.
This is after you went and just git cloned everything by scraping.
Yes. This is after I spent the 17 hours doing all that. So here's all the nice, neat information they give you. They give you pretty much everything except for the original fork URL. If they give that to you in there, then I couldn't find it anywhere. So I could keep track of where there was a fork of some other project, but exactly. I couldn't tell who was the master. So now I need to get rid of SQLite. It takes way too long to get the word list and to get the data in there because it just kind of sucks for the SQL. Solution, MySQL. Now I'm not a programmer. I'm sure there's better solutions for trying to save all this data, but I'm lazy and I know MySQL. So now let's put it all together.
It's still on those hard drives though.
Yes, as of right now, it is still mostly on those hard drives. We'll get to that later. So here's the upgrades I did to my code. I merged the modes into one Python script, so now I have one script that can either download or process repositories. I've added the I added better threading and added the MySQL code. I created a separate script that you'll see later that just takes a list of words and adds the counts for those words into the database. That was extremely unfun and lots of manual stuff.
Did you try to use SQLite as an in-memory database, or was it a file system?
It was a file system.
Okay.
3 terabytes doesn't work in memory so well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a good point.
So even if I thought of trying that at 2 in the morning, yeah, it will work for like maybe an hour, and that would have been it. So the database got the most upgrades. I said I want to know everything. So instead of keeping just the usernames and the repositories, I started keeping everything. I've got account for the directories, account for the projects, the emails that I manually pull out, unfortunately, the usernames and passwords, and I keep track of the last seen ID, so that when I call the API, it knows what I've already seen, all that good stuff. A lot simpler than my original to download these things. So it downloads, it clones it, and then it dumps all the information into my MySQL database.
A lot simpler.
Yes. Here's the processor, which looks incredibly, but 90% of this was manual before this. So now, I've got all these repositories. I am using a processor to OS/WALK and grep all these repositories. I have then run a script that dumps whatever's in the database out into frequency word lists. And the fun part is I manually have to grep these repositories for keywords like a password, username, internal only, email address. I have a regex for email address string. So it pulls all those out, dumps them into files. I cut and paste a whole lot of sed scripts after that to try and get rid of a whole lot of the unnecessary password equals space this, and try to get the passwords to the front. Then I do cut, sort, all that crazy food. And then I manually have to clean them up. Each about a day's worth of download takes 3 days to manually go through and clean up all the passwords that I've grepped out so that I can add them to the database. So now I'm getting all the public repositories. I am now generating my output. Once I do the manual work and all that stuff, I can just press a button and get updated word lists in a matter of minutes. And I keep track of what hard drive, what project is on. So now I can plug in all the hard drives externally and then go find what I want. Hey, this is what I have.
No, that's great.
Bad news is carving out all the data takes forever. I am estimating based on the 10 terabytes I had and the ID numbers for the repositories that I'm guessing is going to take about 30 terabytes to get everything. But with the amount of GitHub repositories that are added daily and weekly, I may never get to the end of these things.
Do you create separate word lists depending on how you got the context? Like these are like passwords that we found. These are email addresses that might be passwords, things like that. How many word lists did you come up with? How many?
Repeat the question.
Sure, you'll see that in a minute.
Can you repeat the question for the recording?
He asked if I kept track of where, or made separate word lists based on how I found the content, such as here's an email address that might be a password. And in fact, I actually went through, and if there's an email address in a password field, I just deleted that line because I knew it would show up in my email list. And if you really want to use emails for passwords, then you just enforce with the email list.
Nothing really neat to say here.
Dun, dun, dun. People actually seen this movie?
Only ones with kids.
Okay, because last time we did this, like nobody knew what this was, and that's my favorite part of the movie. The rest of it, horrible.
All right, so here's some of the lists. Alders is all of the directories that were found, all files, obviously all the files that were found, usernames, things that were grepped out for users, and passwords. Anyone see anything that is at all surprising on here? Yeah. Foobar is actually up there. I don't really test for Foobar normally, but it's there.
SA is on the computer games.
So that's we're going to have a link later on to the word list, but that's the link if you want it right now. Take a picture of it, but I'm going to go faster.
Yeah, to keep this really interesting, all these word lists are stored on GitHub.
All right, so pretty graph. You know, this is where it gets interesting to me. So the obvious stuff. Word list for forced browsing. I got forced browsing from a web app guy, so I don't really know what it means, but I know that it's something that I use as a brute force list. So that's what it kind of means for me. So the word list, just like the SVN Digger project originally stated, creating a smaller default passwords list. So I love the raw queue list for cracking, but it sucks for trying to brute force anything. Static salts, we'll kind of get into that one later, which is awesome. The number 22 file in the all files list, the thing that shows up the 22-second most times, is exceptions.exception.php. How many of you who do web app testing look for exception.php? One.
Not after today.
Right. And guess what exception.php usually handles? Exceptions or errors, and guess what it usually outputs? Awesome stuff. So I started looking for that. Also, I didn't normally look for file.php, just because I'd look for upload.php instead, but it turns out file.php is more common than upload.php, so file.php. And password.text in web applications.
Yes, please.
Wow. Yes. So just to keep in mind, this is of 19 million, right? So even though it's 4,819 down the list, this is of 19 million words. Or files, I'm sorry. So this is how you do forced browsing. It's a technical term. Yeah. SSH1 auth keys, number 370,000. Stored on the web application. Thank you. NTLM SSO magic. I just thought this was funny. It's not really high up on the list, but the file really just has like a password in it and a username. Magic.
Were there any other crazy ones you just didn't run that you definitely did?
Yes. All right. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? So it's what's about the real world. Everybody see the whole secret token thing about GitHub, where if you store your secret token, I get command execution. So there's a great list of where you can find those secret tokens now. And then get command execution, unless you change your secret token, which everyone does, right? Everyone changes their secret token.
Well,
Now. So this is where, I can't pronounce his last name, Joe or Charon or something like that, sent 1,000 emails, 1,000 some odd emails to all of the people who had secret tokens stored on GitHub that he could find.
I'm not doing that for anybody.
And there's a Metasploit module going to be released, and blah, 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 blah. So yes. What?
It's already a pull request.
Yes, it's already there. So you can, it's not committed like every other pull request. But hey, just saying. Ass. All right, so, love you. So start parsing so the not so obvious stuff, I talked about, the files and stuff, but the not so obvious stuff is parse every file from the Git history. So the great thing about Git is when you clone something, you get an entire history of that repository there for you to look through. Well, if you store a password or a key and then you delete it later because you thought, oh damn, I should have deleted my secret token thing, and you commit the change, it's still in the commits, and you can look through it.
It might be on my list.
So another one is match static code analysis. If you just want to find a ton of, like you take a PHP analyzer and you go through every single repository and say, oh, here's one that has 500 or 5,000 problems. The other great one is finding .svn directories in Git repositories where they store credentials in the .svn for some reason.
.hg is a good one too.
HG works as well. Another one is .settings. So parsing.gitignore, what's great about parsing.gitignore is now I know which files you want or are automatically generated by your web application, and now I can request those files like configs. So things that you don't want stored up there, anyways, you guys get it. And the interesting one that I kind of found was on GitHub, if you want a directory to stay there, there are a couple of different ways, but one of the most common ways is just to put a file called empty directory in there. Now, if I start a web application, or I start on a website with your application and you have a bunch of empty directories and you have some security at least on there so that you can, so I get a 404 when I don't know what web application you have. If I look for empty directory file in there and I get nothing, or a 200 at least, but it's blank, now I know that that directory is there, now I know what web application you're using, and now I can do a lot more. Same goes with .dsstore, but pretty much everyone who's ever used a Mac knows how annoying a DSstore file is. More fun stuff running OCR on all of the image files. We've actually found people who took screenshots of default usernames and passwords because they thought they were cool and secure like that. And yeah, OCR finds them pretty good. Using the list of .text files to do some intelligence gathering, and grep all the email addresses. We already talked about that. Stop you giving them ideas. That's it.
Now, here's a little update. Since the first time I've given this talk, I now have a file server with 16 drive bays. So now I've got 10 terabytes that I'm trying to slowly move to a file server with. I think so far I have 12 terabytes in it and 11 more slots open.
So
send me your old hard drives.
yeah, Nova Hackers donated this thing to him.
Yes.
If you have hard drives or just want to give him money for hard drives to help him with this project, please do. There's awesome stuff on there. And I said this at Nova Hackers, and he's like, what? I won't do that. If you give him stuff, he'll do 2 queries for you.
And I actually set up something on my webpage. There's a little form that you can fill out. If you have ideas of something that I'm not grepping out and you want to see a sub list for it, just submit it as a regex, or you just have an idea, hey, why aren't you pulling this out? Because I haven't thought of it, and I'll start pulling it out for you.
So have you used these in the real world? Like, have they been useful for you? Or, I mean, it's totally awesome the way it is now, but I'm just curious if they've been useful for you.
Yeah, for web applications especially, they've been awesome for me. Especially the top 10 directories list. Like,
yeah,
a lot of the stuff I just wouldn't have even thought to look for, like the exception.php, which isn't a directory, but it's one of the things that just was like, oh, now I know where all this is, and it actually resulted in code execution for one point.
Since this is being recorded, I'm going to say no. But the most interesting stuff, like, it's cool to see what's mostly used, but the real interesting stuff is when you scroll down to the bottom of the web page and you start seeing 1, 1, 1, 1. It's like, oh, these all look legit.
Has no one ever done malware analysis and found a 1.exe, right?
I haven't.
All the feds in the room are like, oh shit.
I found the email addresses. I have, in the list for email addresses, I pulled out all the domains because spammers aren't getting this list unless they give me lots of money. If you're out there. But there is a whole lot of references to botnets and command and control code. I found some malware code in it. So I've actually had to turn off my malware scanners on the VM that I'm prepping this from, or it causes all kinds of problems, and I'll go back and why do I only have half of this repository?
Yeah.
Are you looking for licenses too? license files and license keys?
Not yet.
But I've got them.
Are you looking at sites and files?
Not yet.
No. No, and actually the static salts, I actually stopped pulling them out because there was so many static salts being used, and I wanted to get I wanted to submit for CFP, so I just concentrated on emails, usernames, and passwords. But there is so much stuff to pull out. I've had an idea to create a web page that's kind of like the CAPTCHA. Well, that too. But it's kind of like a CAPTCHA where you'll go to it and you'll get maybe 10 lines of raw file and say these are supposed to be passwords. So I can kind of crowdsource this and kind of get through it, because it takes just me sitting watching TV going through. I have got so many shortcuts for my F keys in Vim that it is not even funny. It's like, oh, this line, boop, this line, boop, this line. Boop.
No one uses Vim.
I use Vim.
I use Vim too.
It's all about the edit.
I have also used Nano. I am not afraid to say that. If it's on the box, I will use it.
All right. Cool. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop that one. Stop that one. Wow.
That worked out really well.